Hi, are we ready to start, guys?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Good evening to all, and pleasant good night to Catherine, who is joining us all the way from the UK tonight. Catherine is our Networks Development Manager. For those of you who may not have interacted with me before, I'm Shazara Alibukas Ramlogan, a branch treasurer, and I will be leading the meeting as such, but of course, getting some help from the other members of the EC. I would like to welcome everybody to our meeting this evening. And the topic that we've chosen today is mental health in the workplace. I, for one, am very pleased that this is our topic that we've chosen for today, because more and more we are seeing that, that lack of support for mental health is leading to so many issues in the workplace and, of course, the wider society. All right, so the mental health it's no longer, I would say, a totally taboo topic, but it's definitely a topic that we need to discuss more, to encourage support and care for those who need it, and also to discourage the stigma that's associated with mental health issues. And as health and safety practitioners, we really hold a very critical role in, trying to encourage our employers to take action, and also to encourage our fellow employees to really reach out when help is needed. All right. So on that note, I'm going to pass the floor on to Alina, who will introduce our speaker for this evening. Alina.
Good evening, all. Thank you, Shazara. I have the privilege of introducing our speaker this evening. Dr. Roxanne L. Gibet is a chartered psychologist and a registered occupational psychologist who provides consultancy services to organizations using an evidence-based approach to address their work-related concerns. Her expertise in assessing occupational safety and health issues to promote safe and healthy practices include developing and facilitating training in the workplace, inclusive of leadership training. She is an invited speaker at conferences, has published on leadership, mental health, well-being, and leads projects internationally. And I want to add that she is also a proud daughter of Trinidad. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Gibet to the floor.
Thank you very much, Alina and Shazara. Did I get that correct? Lovely. I will share the screen. Okay. Now, I do apologize. I've got a bug, so I might mute myself to bring up a lung or two during the presentation. I'll try not to. But in a minute, I've got some water, so I'll try to see if I can make it through the next 20, 30 minutes. Okay, so thank you for that lovely introduction. I will be talking about mental health because that's my area of expertise in terms of occupational safety and health. So some of the information you might already know, but in order to ensure that everyone understands where I'm coming from, I'm not trying to dumb it down for anybody, but I just want to make sure that we all understand everything that I'm saying, that we all understand from the same area that I'm coming from. So don't worry, it's all good. I use these same approach everywhere I speak to make sure that everybody understands. And my thingy is not going now. Why isn't it moving? I don't know. There we go. Just going to panic there. So what are we going to look at this afternoon, tonight, for those who are in different time zones? We're going to focus on health and mental health, looking at mental health at work, the impact of mental health in organizations, and why we need to focus on practices and policies, and also anything else we might think about. What are we talking about? Again, I do like to use the WHO definitions because I think they're easy to understand. Everyone can get easy access to them. And it's quite holistic as well. So WHO defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And also looks at mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and can contribute to her or his community. So, mental health is not just, saying, yeah, I'm good, I'm going for a lie, I'm going to hang out. It's about, can you contribute? Do you have the state of mind to contribute? Are you getting support to do it? When you want to contribute, can you do it in a safe, environment where you get the resources to help you move forward in life? So it can affect both health and mental health. And as we've all been through COVID, we've all been through the pandemic and the lockdown. And as we see here, a lot of what we went through in COVID would have affected our health and our mental health. Social change, stressful work conditions, discrimination, exclusion, a healthy lifestyle, risk of violence, physical ill health, and human rights violations. All of these are issues that impact on how we feel and impacts on our overall health. And I'm focusing more today on stressful work conditions, because when you're working in occupational health and safety field, that is the focus that we want to, move forward with. So in terms of mental ill health at work, now this is typically defined as anxiety, depression, and stress, and it may include work-related fatigue as well. And I have been including fatigue a lot more recently because of everything that's been going on. Working from home while trying to manage your work life and your home life has made a lot of us quite fatigued as well, trying to manage both. Especially if you're dealing with young kids, especially if you don't have a suitable place, especially when the entire world went into lockdown, to work effectively. You might have been sitting on a sofa, sitting on a floor, your back against the wall in your bedroom. You might have had a dedicated workspace, but all of these different stresses, daily stresses, all these little hassles as well that happen to us would impact on our mental health. But in terms of the work environment, in terms of how the work environment will lead to us becoming mentally unhealthy, it will not cover those mental ill health conditions that individuals would enter the workplace with, all those mental disorders, or that it could develop once within the work environment. So we talk about mental disorders such as chronic depression, bipolar, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia, eating disorders, trauma-related disorders, and again, substance abuse. Now, these are more disorders that may not necessarily develop within the work environment or be caused by the work environment, but people can enter the work environment with some of these disorders, or they might develop them within the workplace. But the workplace would not really lead to them developing these ill health conditions. Now, I tend to focus initially on stress, because while stress is not a medically defined condition, it's usually the condition that actually leads to work-related anxiety and work-related depression, also work-related fatigue as well. So that's usually the initial state that we succumb to before we succumb to other more chronic conditions such as anxiety and depression. And while it can be difficult to describe, we all know when we're stressed, we have those psychosomatic symptoms, your back aches, you've got a headache, you can't concentrate, you're foggy, your mind is foggy, you might eat too much, eat too little, drink too much, not drink at all. So it changes our behavior and it impacts on our physical state. And it occurs when a physical, mental, emotional factor causes bodily or mental tension. So the stressor can be physical, it can be mental, or it can be emotional. You might have you might be bullied by someone in the workplace, and that causes the emotional, expectations about how we react to it. It could be physical, might have a physical reaction to something that happens to us, and it also can be mental, might have too much of a workload. So that makes us, mentally again challenged, because we're trying to manage everything that we may asked to do within the work environment. And I did try very hard to get information on the Caribbean. And I have to say, the literature, I may not have looked enough or hard enough, but the literature on the figures in terms of mental health in the Caribbean could be improved, I think. And I think we need more research in that area. And it comes even touchy when we come to occupational safety and health figures in the Caribbean. But this is information that we all know. The negative perceptions about ill health, mental ill health remained. We've got the stigma, we've got the taboos. Don't mention that you're suffering. Don't mention that you're struggling a bit with your mental health because people look at you differently. And then they might ascribe some sort of rationale for that, especially in the Caribbean. The you're being jumbied or whatever, and all these perceptions that are incorrect. I think one of the challenges I found when I was pulling this together as well is that a lot of the stuff on mental health remains at the society level, and there's very limited information as to mental ill health in terms of the organizational level. So again, everything is geared towards supporting individuals within society, and it doesn't seem to be that many resources available to supporting individuals within the work environment. And also we found as well, the literature shows that there's very little population level data on the mental health burden that occurs, the cost of it, the outcomes of it, how people can get the support they need. Can they get the support they need? Where is that available? How easily is it accessible? So that information on the burden of mental health is severely lacking in the Caribbean. It's also challenging to know if the systems that are in place are actually meeting the needs of the population, and if actually it's an equitable, everyone who wants that support and those set of resources can get them and use them effectively. But there is progress. There is an awareness that this needs to happen. Excuse me. So in 2012, there was an acknowledgement that mental health policies and practices needed to be adjusted. And again, because it's in the Caribbean, because we don't have the same sort of society as the Western world, even though we do tend, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, to grab things and use it and accept it as our own. But we have to also consider the cultural dynamics, because what will work in the Caribbean may not necessarily work outside of the Caribbean. We have to start accepting that we are different. And there are some things that actually would be more useful for us within the Caribbean. That is, excuse me? Hello? Did someone want something? No. And we have to consider how we can respect and use our cultural situations to the best of our ability in managing our mental ill health. And there we go. So what I did find was from a PAHO and WHO document that, again, it's not very recent, unfortunately. But I think, that's something we need to take account of and say, okay, well, where can I get, what research can I do to make sure that we have a better understanding of what's happening within the Caribbean, especially in terms of occupational safety and health. And it shows that the percentage of countries with mental health policies, they're not that high. The most in Central America, Mexico, and Latin Caribbean was 60%. Before, but then that's better. Before 2005, it was 10%. Non-Latin Caribbean, which is, all the English-speaking countries, it's only 31%. And those with no policies, it's at 50%. So it's not very good in trying to, raise the awareness of the issue. And also, once you raise the awareness of the issue, how can you show that, you need support in these areas? You need to have the policies, you need to have the practices, you need to have the legislation as well, to make sure that yourself as practitioners and other occupational health professions, doctors, nurses, occupational therapists, can understand that, we need to move forward with this. And also the percentage of the total budget allocated to mental health. And again, all these figures are at the society level. They're not at the organizational level. So countries that have less than 1% of the budget, in non-Latin Caribbean, that's 0. We do have between 1 to 5%, about 62% of the countries that were, explored in this area had it, which 62% is fine. But again, this should be high. We should be allocating a lot more towards actually, addressing the mental health issues within the Caribbean. Now, again, usually when I do this, I can usually find stats, because I usually use UK stats that come out annually to show the proportion of stress, anxiety, and depression that actually occur within the workplace the previous year, but I couldn't find that, unfortunately. So I do have to say that there's becoming a more robust push that says that, if we don't take account of occupational safety and health, it can lead to undesirable outcomes, as we know, such as death. And most countries tend to focus on the safety aspect of IOSH. And it's only recently a lot more countries are becoming aware that, okay, well, we do manage the risk with respect to safety a lot better than we used to 50, 60 years ago. So there are very few fatalities within most organizations now globally. And the UK is quite good. It has one of the lowest fatality levels in the world. I can't remember the figures right now. But in terms of the health aspect of it, that still needs quite a lot of work, because, again, going back to about the stigma, because you don't want to admit that you're struggling. You don't want to admit that, you need some help. You don't want to admit that something isn't quite working for you. So we tend to internalize all that and try to manage it in different ways. And you should be saying, well, no, I need some support. I need you to, take account of how I'm feeling. The work environment isn't working for me. What can you do to support me? And acknowledging that when you have poor occupational safety and health policies, need to put my teeth back in, they can, have a negative impact that's very wide. It affects labor, it affects productivity, it affects household income, poverty. And we know that those workers who work on the black market or who work on the gig economy, all these part-time roles, they usually one step away from poverty because they're just not earning enough. So the social security system, trade, the environment, these are all impacted when people don't have the support to work effectively and to be able to perform and produce as much as they can. But there is an increasing acknowledgement that IOSH should not be dismissed. It is here. We need it. We need to think about how best we can move forward with making sure that it is a lot more managed and a lot more supported within the Caribbean region. It's when you're thinking about statistics as well, we need to know the number of workers who are actually suffering from mental ill health due to work. Who are these people? Is it more than 10% of the workforce? Is it more than 20% of the workforce? Is it something we can reliably sustain, or would you need to get, the governments involved and say, okay, this is a major problem. What can we do about it? Again, number of working days lost, because in the UK, usually have for each person, usually have between 15 to 17 lost days per year. And then you've got 600,000 people on sick leave. So you can imagine the amount of days that are being lost every year because people are not able to work safely and healthily within the workplace. And then the cost doesn't lie at the governmental level, it doesn't lie at society. Most of the cost for, when you're on sickness absence due to stress, it relies on the individual, because they usually have to funnel out themselves. And then business then has to get someone in to replace them temporarily or permanently if they do step out of the workplace. And then again, the government has to have the overlying cost for, like in some countries, like in the UK, they've got, the social system that people can rely on to help them when they're suffering with their mental health. But usually the major cost is due to the individual and what they have to do in order to manage their ill health. Going to a doctor, going for therapy if they think that's useful to them, or, looking for other jobs that they can do while they try to figure out what to do with themselves while they try to recover. And then, of course, how these work-related ill health cases compare to mental health disorders. So again, in the Caribbean, there's a strong focus on the disorders aspect rather than as they relate to work. Are they comparable? Are the cases comparable? Is it that there are more people who are suffering from mental work-related ill health, or there are more people who succumb to mental health disorders? Right now, that information is not there. So we can't say exactly which side need a lot more resource, which side you can say, well, what is working here? Can we sort of like transfer what's happening to the other side? Ooh. Do you know what happened there? In terms of the causes as to what can actually contribute to mental ill health, usually, I mean, a lot of the research has shown this as well. You know, workload pressures. You ask to do something, and then you ask to do something else, and you ask to do something else. You think, okay, well, how am I supposed to do all of these things with the deadline that you've given me? Because everything, again, is urgent. Everything, again, needs to be done immediately because, you know, everything has a tight deadline. So I usually tell people, if you're being asked to do 10 things, and they all have the same deadline, then obviously none of them are essential. None of them are required immediately because not all of them will be used. So again, you can think, okay, well, if you ask me to do this, which of these things do you think that I should pursue first? And if you don't want to get an answer, okay, well, I will then tell you, okay, I can do X, Y, and Z. But, you know, most people don't have that luxury of being presented, you know, with an option. Usually there's still to do 5 different things. They need to be done in the next half an hour. And again, if you don't have the resources to do it, that can be quite intense for you. If you're given too much responsibility, you know, again, without the support systems to manage this, it can make you quite stressed. Then if you don't have the required support systems in place, if your manager is not supporting you, if your colleagues are not supporting you, this is especially at the managerial level, because then if that is not available, it'll be hard to, you know, get a colleague to help you because that colleague might then have another 5 different tasks to do that they can't step away from. So again, the manager needs to know what you need. Can the manager supply it for you? So again, all of these issues are a lot of demands mainly and lack of support. And in order to counteract that, we have to say, okay, what are the resources I can give you? What are the resources that you need to move forward with everything that I'm asking you to do? And that's why we need policies and practices. So why do we need policies within the work environment? And my voice is going, so I'll have some water. And now when you have a policy in place, there are various things it can help with. It can remove the stigma of mental health and mental disorders because you are saying that this is how we perceive mental health. There's nothing wrong with it. You may be struggling. This is how we're going to support you. You know, that information is there to say that this is fine. This is fine within the work environment. This is fine within the at the societal level. It can also remove the discrimination that emerges from those suffering from mental health and mental disorders because they can see like, well, there's nothing wrong with me. Because everyone suffers at some point in time. Everyone experiences stresses. Everyone gets hassled during the day. And we might become a bit tense, again, which is fine. But if it continues and continues, that becomes chronic, then that's when we will step away from the workplace. And the policy can also ensure that the actions are evidence-based and focusing on the specific issue. And then again, it's acknowledging the interface between work and health. Work is good for you, and we know this, again, all the literature shows that work is very good for you. Good work is even better for you. Poorly designed work will probably make you ill. Excuse me. And work where you don't have the support systems in place, work where you're getting bullied, where you've got poor relationships, it will negatively impact on your health. And policies can also provide direction to addressing the issue. What can we do about this? And it also, and a policy can also support an organization's well-being agenda. I'm not going to read that. So you can read that at your own leisure, but it's important to know that you have to start at the macro level. You always have to start at the organizational level. It's not fruitful to start with the individual and say, well, Joe Blogs was off on sickness absence for 6 weeks, so there's something wrong with him, we need to fix him. That's not the solution. Always start at the organizational level. What is happening within the organization that we need to address, that we need to put plans in place to say that this could be more effective. Once we've addressed the issue at the organizational level, we've got a policy in place that says that this is what the organization wants to do with respect to mental health. We can then focus on, no, I've got that wrong, hold on. Macro refers to societal, can also refer to organizational, and then we will go to the organizational level. they can say that, you can develop and implement a workplace mental health policy that will benefit the employees. And then once you have healthy employees, you will ensure that they can perform better, they can produce more. That production can actually then help the community at large, because people always give back to the community, they always give back to the workplace. So again, as I said at the start, poor mental health can impact across the spectrum, social services, the community, productivity, the environment. So what's required? Now, going back to policies, as I said before, you shouldn't really have policies that focus on the individual, because the individual is not really causing stresses to happen within the work environment. Those can trigger down because of what's happening at the organizational level. So how do you develop a workplace mental health policy? You need to have a vision. What do you want to come out of the organization with respect to managing its stresses and also ensuring that the employees have the support systems that they need? What are the values that you have? What are the principles? What are the objectives that you want to achieve? And again, this statement is looking at the future. 5, 10 years time, you want to say yes. People always become ill because there's always something happening in life. People always get stressed. But you want to make sure that this can be effectively managed. And also, if you've got a well-functioning organization that is supportive, you would have very few people falling ill. And that's when you focus on the individual level. Why is Jane Smith still struggling a bit? What else is happening in her life that we can support her with? So what is worthwhile? What do you want to do? What do you value within the organization? Then once you have the objectives, you can translate the policy into concrete statements of what is this to be achieved. What do you want the organization to stand for? What do you want to focus on? And of course, you always have to involve everybody who's involved. So all stakeholders, whether it's staff, whether it's customers, other organizations, if you're in a supply chain, get everybody involved in exactly what do you want to achieve within this organization. In terms of practices, I do like this slide because I use it a lot as well, because again, it shows you the upward trend. So you always start at the primary level. That's when you're trying to prevent someone from becoming ill within the work environment. So again, what needs to happen here? You're focusing on prevention. So do you need to change the jobs? Do you need to change job designs? Do you need to change how people work? Are you giving the workforce enough time to get the work done? Is everything rush? What is happening at the organizational level that you need to change? Do your supervisors and managers need to be upskilled? Because again, we always have this, every workplace globally do this. Someone does a job that's quite well, and they're producing and they're functioning and they're, flying on hitting all cylinders. Then you decide to promote that person. Then you promote them and you give them to look after 3, 4, 5 members of staff. Because someone is doing a job well doesn't mean that they will become a good supervisor or they will become a good manager, because they don't have that skill set. So if you want to promote them, if you want to give them, if you want to give them, a greater challenge, you have to make sure that they can actually do the role that you're putting them in. Because they're doing one role well doesn't mean they will do a second or a third role well. So if you want to make people supervisors and managers, you have to train them to become supervisors and managers. And then they also have to want to become that and want to be able to do it well. So you have to think, okay, how can I prevent someone from becoming ill? Make sure that the supervisors and managers actually can supervise and manage and lead. At the secondary level, that's when we go into groups or teams. You come that layer down within the organization. You go, what does the team or the group need that you can provide them to help them function effectively within that setting? What else do they need? Can they? And again, resilience is fine, but you don't try to make someone resilient for poor management or poor practices within the organization. They will still become ill. They'll be resilient to leaving the organization as soon as they can because you're not supporting them. But then at the tertiary level, that is when everything is, you've got good practices, the jobs are designed well, people know where their support systems are, you've got good leaders, you've got good supervisors, but there's something with Jane Smith that's just not working for her. She might need a bit more support. That's when you focus on Jane at that point in time, because nothing else has worked. And you have to say, okay, well, what else can I support you with? So that's when someone needs to step out from the work environment, and then you help to bring them back in, because you're helping them to recover and stuff. Because once someone steps away from the workplace and they stay away 6, 12 months, they're likely not to come back. So that's someone you've lost, that includes a cost to you. You have to recruit someone else, and recruitment is very, very expensive. Okay. And also, we need to focus on the source of stress. What is causing the employees to become ill? You need to remove or mitigate the stresses. You need to go to the source of distress. What is driving the stressor? And again, I said, we focus on leaders, because usually when something goes wrong within an organization, it's usually people defined, someone with poor leadership, supervisory, management skills, who is doing what they know, but may not be best for the team, for the individual, for the organization. So what is happening? Is it too much demands, too little control, not enough good relationships, not enough support? What is the source? And when you've identified the source of the stress, you need to look at it. How can we fix this at the organizational level, the primary level? What needs to change? Do we need to get a different training system in for leaders? Do we need to think about, okay, how can we ensure that workers do not get too many tasks at once? What do we need to do? What did your organization need to achieve, and how can we best? It has to happen at the organizational level. And you always have to carry out a risk assessment. What are the risks of this? What are the hazards that are leading to the risk? What is happening within them? Again, we know this is, I wouldn't say simpler, but at least with the safety aspect, you can see you've got a hole in the floor. Okay, that's a risk. What can you do about it? You can't really see the hole in the individual, because mental health is basically invisible. So safety is more visible. When something goes wrong, you can see what has happened. You can see that the crane collapsed. You can see something fell on a worker. You can see the incident that happened. So it's quite visible. When someone is struggling, they're internalizing all of that, so they might be calm, but you don't know that they actually can't function. They're actually struggling. So when you carry out the risk assessment, you have to ask, well, how can we get to figure out exactly what is the source of stress for these individuals with respect to their mental health? And again, so at the organizational level, we want to prevent harm to workers. So we do the risk assessment. What changes need to be made at the organizational level? And the health and safety executive of Great Britain, they've got quite a lot of tools on their website that's free to use. And the management standards approach is quite a good approach. It's free to use. Anyone can use it. Go to your agency's website, download it, lots of support there. And that's one of the things you can do. You can assess, so what are the demands like? What's your control like? What's the support like? What are your relationships like? What's your role like? What change is happening within the organization? And we can't stop the change. Change is constant. And as we saw with COVID, it was literally overnight. So look at the work characteristics that can lead to, that are stresses. All of these would be a particular stress within the work environment. We can assess these with the management, using the management standards approach, and say, okay, what's happening within the organization? What do I need to focus on? So with one team, you might want to focus on demands. One team might show poor control or low control. One team might say we don't have enough support. Now, again, when you're asking people questions about what's happening, they tend to get quite specific about what's wrong with them, which is fine. Then you have to take all that information and then make sense out of it, because everyone will tell you something different. And you say, okay, well, okay, you're all telling me something different here. Let me look at these data and say, okay, what is really happening within the organization? That's why you start at the primary level, to get some sort of understanding of what's happening, higher up the chain. And then you go to the secondary level. What's happening within teams and groups? what is the line management training like? What their competencies like? And DHC has a line management competency indicator tool that's free to use, free to download. How are people communicating? You know, every time I go home to Trinidad, I always get a culture shock because you walk around here and everyone ignores you. Every time I go somewhere in Trinidad, someone comes up to you and says good morning or good evening or good day, and they, oh, yeah, I need to respond, I need to do that. Yeah, I'm back home now. I need to be human again. So again, that comfort level of making sure that you're seen. How are you communicating? Does the communication need to improve? Is there any training that needs to happen? Interpersonal skills, because some people might be, again, good at their job, but they might not be able to have those casual conversation with someone to get someone to draw it and see exactly what the issue is. Can they make decisions? Are they allowed to make decisions? What decisions can they make? Is there conflict within the team, within the group? How can we resolve that? What are the roles within the teams? Are they equitable? Can anyone speak up? Is that psychological safety within the team, within the organization? What is happening? What needs to change and why? And then we get to the individual level. At this level, you want to manage the effects of ill health. Again, communication styles. Can the person speak up? Are they terrified to raise the issue? Can you teach them to be more open? Again, at this level, all these things are fine. We just don't want to start it before we understand what's happening within the organization. Do they need to learn to relax? Can they take advantage of employee assistance? Do they need counseling? Do they need to rehab? And within the UK, you need to legally provide the adjustments that the person needs to get back into the workplace, adjustments and accommodations. That is when we're at the tertiary level. How can you accommodate them? How can you adjust the workplace to make sure that it works for them, for that particular individual? And once you do everything top down, you'd have to do very few instances at the tertiary level, because you would have been managing a lot of the stresses that's happening. Too many demands, yeah, we can control that. Poor control, yeah, we can tell people what they can and can't do. Support, yeah, we can do that at the organizational level. But when you get to this, it has to be very person specific, because at this level, that individual needs something that will support him or her or them. So what practices can we consider? Now, I do like this. Who is that? I can't remember. Oh, Johnson, Lundberg, and Lundberg. Yeah, this is quite, because it's about adjusting what you can do and how you can do it. What can the person manage? They can choose their work tasks, decide on how quickly they can work or how slowly they can work. And they can decide about working hours. Flexi time and hybrid working is, a lot more visible now. But even though organization might say you can work in a hybrid way, you can decide your own piece, but then they always come and say, okay, can you do this for me? Do you have that? Are you checking up? And there are companies who are actually looking at the keystrokes that people do when they're working from home, because again, that trust level. Because if you see someone, yeah, they're working, well, no, they're not necessarily working. Visibility does not mean that someone is working and someone is supported. No, that is so erroneous. But it's allowed giving that latitude to the individual so that they can feel comfortable. And once they feel comfortable, they actually perform a lot better. Again, this is another instrument that I like as well, Workability Index. Again, that's free to use. It's self-assessment question, measures, the person then says, okay, I can do this, I can't do that. And it's actually quite reliable and valid. So it's quite a good instrument to use. And it can detect work-related health risks, because you're also asking the person how much sickness absence they've been on. Have the doctors diagnosed them with any particular injury? Are they likely to retire? Are they nursing injury while they wait? So it's quite detailed, quite a long questionnaire, but it actually helps to get an understanding of how you can support the worker, whether getting them to stay within the environment by adjusting and accommodating what they need, or getting them ready to leave the organization as well, because they can't function within the organization. As I said, it's quite detailed, the current workability, what can they do? What have they done before? How do those two compare? Are they managing the demands that are coming to them on the job? How many illnesses have they been diagnosed with? How many impairments do they have? And is it going to get worse? sick leave they've taken, and again, their own prognosis of their workability in 2 years' time, because people do understand, this is what I can't do, this is what I can't do, this is what I can manage. So what else can we look at? We need to be focused and specific. You can look at a generic approach, but it will not work for your organization, because there are a lot of things that are similar within organizations, but then you have to think about the culture and climate of the organization, which will be quite unique. You know, when I speak to different places, you know, in manufacturing or mining or construction, they say, you know, oh yeah, we need, this is specific to us, something. Well, no, everyone has risk, everyone has demands, everyone has control, everyone needs support. So in that sense, it's specific. So you can't take away from that. But when you come to actually understanding what needs to be done within the organization, that's when you need to move away from the generic approach and think of what will work within this organization, what is useful for employees and the organization itself to understand how to fix itself so it can move forward to be a lot more successful. And of course, it's essential to assess the stresses that are specific to that organization. Because, you know, most lawyers will have a problem with time. They've got too many demands. They just work very long hours. Again, those in the, you know, banking sector as well. Do they need to work those long hours? Probably not. You need a different way to manage it. But there's this assumption that here, I'm a banker, I need to work 80, 90 hours, 100 hours a week. You know, I'm a lawyer, I need to do the same thing. Usually not, because nothing in life is ever that essential, that specific, that's needed within a 24 hours. There are very few things. If you're a surgeon, you've got someone that you're operating on, yeah, you need to stay there. And most things in life, trust me, you really do not need to be exposing yourself, exposing workers to those many stresses, those many demands, not giving them support, you know, having a poor work environment. So no, nothing is ever that specific in life. Again, this is another slide I like as well, because again, it shows all the aspects that actually would lead to employees being well and having a fully functioning organization. Communication is key. It covers everything. You need to communicate well. You need to focus on work-life balance. You need to look at the occupational safety and health. Are employees involved? Are they being recognized? Are they allowed to grow and develop? Again, you know, you support the workplace, you support your employees. They will give it back to you in spades. But again, it's about communication. See people. It's not just about visibility, but about seeing them, whether they're at home, they're in the office, you know, talking to them. You know, some organizations, people, you know, senior managers are on the floor, but then they don't talk to anybody. So, you know, they come to see the employees see them. There's absolutely no dialogue that goes on. That's not a healthy organization. And I think I'm almost done now. So thank you. So I will stop the share and see if there are any questions for me.
Hi, good afternoon. So there are a couple of questions. Let me start at the top. So one is most EAP or most organizations utilize an EAP to address anything they perceive as a mental health issue. What are the limitations of this approach, and what sort of professional training is needed to be sought after?
Well, EAPs are fine. I do think EAPs are quite useful because they cover a myriad of sins. It can be health, it can be occupational health, financial, legal. And that depends on what because most EAPs are outsourced anyway. So it depends on what the organization wants, what it thinks it needs to manage the staff and what's happening within the organization effectively. Again, you need someone, and this is more HR, human resources area, what is required. Again, you need to look back as to what has happened within the organization, how were people supported, to know what you need to put in place within the organization. What are the struggles? What are people struggling with within the organization? And you should know that to be able to say, yeah, this is what I want from the EAP provider. I don't think that it's just understanding and knowing what the organization can afford, because people change EAPs because they want something a bit cheaper. And they might be prepared to just say, we just want to provide these 4 services, need to provide these 6 services again. That depends on what the organization think is suitable. And again, EAP is essential, but that is again at the tertiary level, at the individual level. So that should not be brought into play unless the person needs some individual support. And one thing that is quite useful in an organization, you set up a buddy system that where you have 2 people who are quite comfortable with each other, they can check in with each other, they can have chats, especially if someone is on sickness absence, have that person call. So the person then feels connected to the, to the workplace. Someone is checking on me. So buddy system works quite, and it's inexpensive, it's free. But yeah, but EAPs, it depends on what the organization wants out of the EAP. So I can't really say that you should do X or Y. It depends what's happening. Again, that's where you get this to the specific, not a generic. All EAPs provide a certain level of services, but what does your organization need?
I think you really answered that question well, because you touched on using that at the micro level, and you should look at the macro level first, having policies, procedures in place. There's another question that popped up. What training is recommended for managers and supervisors to be able to detect employees needing help, and how to approach this sensitively?
Ooh. Well, the UK does a lot of mental health first aid training, which is useful for raising awareness of the issue. I have a problem with it because people get a 2-hour course, 4-hour course, Monday course, and then they become experts, and then they want to diagnose. Now that is useful to understand mental health within the work environment. But what you need to do is understand people, be able to read people. I don't know if you can train that, but again, if you've got the environment where you know someone and you can look at that person and say, okay, well, Jane doesn't look too good today. And go and have a quiet word, pull her aside, go have a tea or coffee with her and say, okay, do you want to talk about anything? Just have a quiet word. I mean, there's no major training, and don't be aggressive, don't be too pushy as well. Allow the person to, come into your sphere and say, yes, I'm comfortable speaking about this. You might not want to tell you a lot, but just letting that person know that you're there to listen is usually enough. And again, in terms of identifying, I mean, we all know when people start to not look themselves. We all start, they might start coming to work late, they might, their dress sense might not be as good as it was, they might start showering. So, okay, something's going on. Do I need to ask these questions? And I mean, I always say that, when I was in Trinidad, I used to work in the Ministry of Health, and we always, and that I think they still do, but they would have people in place with serious mental disorders. And usually, because we all worked in HR at the time, usually we can tell when they started to slip. Maybe they stopped taking the medication because, they'd come to work and you would get the whiff and you think, okay, what's going on here? Then their mood will change. Usually you grab some dump doctor and say, could you check out this person, please? Because I think we need to, either get them some treatment or change their medication or something. But you can usually tell, it's about being observant and being aware of who your colleagues are, being aware of what they normally like. And if you notice any sort of slight change, and you have a quiet, I'm sorry, is this something you want to, but then be, quite gentle with it. But you just observe and just be willing to be brave enough to have that gentle conversation, and don't assume that something is wrong with the person. You might just have had a rubbish morning, everything went wrong that morning. They just, but it's useful to just have a quiet conversation. Yeah.
I got you. Another question came up in terms of outside of taking a vacation, any guidance on managing burnout?
Well, if you're burnout, you should not be in the workplace because you will not be functioning. Trust me, if you're burnt out, you will not be able to do anything. You would be lying in a bed with your covered thing, just lying there in the dark. You would not be able to do anything. if you know you can, again, you need to take breaks. Sorry about that. Now, you should be taking breaks within a week. You should be taking your holidays. And some people, I know especially in Trinidad, we would accumulate leave so you can have like 3-4 months off because we get enough leave in Trinidad, which is fine. If you can manage it, if you can manage the demands, if you can manage the workload, you know, and if you think you're comfortable with that, that's fine. But if you're beginning to feel a bit tired, a bit restless, you know, just take a few days off. A few days off in a dark room and you'll be fine. But yeah, don't get to the state where you can't function, because once you're burnt out, you cannot function. You can be very stressed and be functional. You can be very anxious and be functional. You can be somewhat depressed and feel a little bit functional. But we don't want those to become chronic, where you can't think, you can't figure out, you know, what am I going to wear today to go to work? How am I going to get there? You sit in the car and you think, why am I sitting in the car? We don't want you to reach that. So take breaks, and it doesn't have to be a long break. You can take a day, a month, you know, just make sure you step away from work, you know, to recuperate and make sure you get enough a good night's sleep as well. Look at your diet, look at your self-care, you know, buy a costume for Mars next year. Are they having pods? I don't know. That was so bizarre. But you know, do whatever makes you happy, you know.
Yeah. Okay. We have 2 questions and I'll ask them one at a time, technology based. So the first one is, any practical advice on managing the use of technology and mental health? So there's a, you know, I need to respond to emails timely, take calls and messages, you know, that anxiety that comes with having a mobile device. Any advice on managing tech and mental health?
Yeah, turn off your phone. Shut down your computer. That's
Okay.
it.
Okay, that was a pretty straightforward answer.
Well, no, it's, yeah, we've got the 24/7 and there's a expectation that we will respond. But again, as I say, nothing in life is ever that urgent. If someone is expecting you to respond after they send you an email at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's their problem, not yours. So if they want to send an email at 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't have to respond to it. You can make the decision that says, this is not within my work. I mean, I'm a bit of a militant, so that's me speaking, but you can decide, you know, if you're intimidated and you think you need to respond to it because you will get a harsh reprimand from the person sent it, then you have to think about, do I want to continue with that within that work environment? Because trust me, you will become stressed, you will step away from the workplace. So, you know, take the choice, turn off your laptop, turn off your tablet, your phone. I mean, I send emails at strange times, but that's me. I don't expect anybody to respond to me. But you can step away if you wish to. Right.
And the other tech question is, the person who asked the question says that they've tried Headspace, a mental well-being app. Based on your experience, any recommendations for other apps in terms of mental well-being?
No, I don't really look at the apps as such, because I usually do a one-to-one. I mean, there are good apps out there. Just Google good apps for mental health. I mean, I think there are lots of free ones as well. Just, you know, Google and see what the reviews are about them, and if that helps you, use it. Because I know there are quite some good ones out there, but I'm sorry, I'm not big on technology. I'm not big on having a phone with 500 apps, and no, I go on social media like once every 2 months or something. So, sorry, not me. Okay. But there are good ones out there. So if they're useful for you, do some research, look at the reviews, look at what other people are saying about them, try them out, and see if it works. Yeah.
Sound advice. One last question is, how does one get into the field of occupational psychology?
Well, how I got into it was a bit different, but usually you need a first degree in psychology, and then you can go west. You can either go to America or go to England. You go to America, you can do a master's in industrial organizational psychology. You go to US or Europe, you can do occupational psychology or work psychology. Rest of Europe, And then depending on where you want to work, you may have to do a PhD. In America, you're required to, you can't work on your own unless you've got a PhD in the States. You can get a master's and function with work with a psychologist. In UK, you can work on your own with a master's, but if you want to beef up your credibility, you can become chartered. You can become a chartered psychologist as well. So it gives you a bit more credibility. So that's another bit of money that they require from you to be a chartered psychologist. And then in the UK, we're now regulated by the Healthcare Professions Council. So you can't call yourself adjective, I never could say that word, which are, I can't remember the 8 ones. It's clinical counseling, forensic, occupational health, and something else. Can't remember the other 3. But you can't call yourself any of those 2. So I can say I'm an occupational psychologist, and I'm fine to say that. But if someone is not chartered, is not registered with ACPC, they can only say they're work psychologist, business psychologist. Does the same thing, but it shows that I'm a bit more robust in my qualifications. I'm less likely to cause someone harm.
Okay, that's it for the questions. There was just one comment from one of our participants, just reminding everyone that the website findcareTT.com from the Ministry of Health has a lot of local resources, contact numbers, and apps that can be used. So I'll repeat that URL. It's findcareTT.com, so you all can check it out. And I believe that's the end of the Q&A session. So on behalf of the IOSH Caribbean branch, I would like to thank you, Dr. Jave, for presenting to us this topic and giving us a lot of food for thought, especially in terms of managing mental health in the workplace, in terms of a policy at macro level and then filtering it down. I do believe a lot of companies in Trinidad only deal with it at the individual level. So a lot for thought there, and a lot that we can go back and take to our organizations. So again, a heartfelt thank you, and we do wish you a speedy recovery, and we hope to have you again sometime.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I do appreciate it. And don't worry, it's not just Trinidad that looks after the individual level. Lots of organizations do that as well. Lots of other people globally do that. So you're not, Trinidad is doing nothing that no other countries that is done other countries. So okay, enjoy the weekend. Today's Friday, right? Yeah, it is. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.